Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Ponder, and on behalf of the Build Initiative, welcome to Rebuilding and Reinvigorating Early Childhood Leadership Capacity. We're so excited about being with you today, and we love our audience already. And just to be sure we kind of know who you are, we wish we could have everybody introduce themselves, but if you've been on Zooms doing that before, you know that would be the end of our time. We want you to respond to a poll that will give some general categories of who you probably are, and give us some idea of who we're talking to. So, Jonathan, would you got it posted? So if you'll just respond to the closest person, closest possibility for you, that would be fabulous. Ah, here come our results. Interesting. So what this tells us is we have people from a lot of different areas of early childhood work in our webinar today. And now I'm dying to know what all the others are, but maybe we'll find that out if you just post in the chat who you are and where you're from. That will be helpful as we look back on who heard what we said today. We're just so glad you're here. You think that's everybody, Jonathan?
Yes.
During and following the pandemic, we heard an awful lot about the loss of classroom teachers in all kinds of early childhood settings, from schools to Head Start to childcare, pre-K, all of the areas that we work on together. But what we didn't hear as much about, nor respond to in a very concrete way, and an area that I believe was critical, was the loss of directors and other leaders of early childhood programs. One of those pioneer leaders in supporting early childhood leadership and the founder of the McCormick Center for Early Childhood Leadership, Dr. Paula Jordy Bloom, coined the phrase that early childhood directors and other leaders are the gatekeepers of quality in early childhood. We all know that quality matters in all early childhood programming, and the gains that we all talk about from early childhood programs were achieved in high quality programs. Quality matters, and it matters a lot. Today, we're very fortunate to hear how 3 states, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina, responded to the challenges in this important area of our work through professional development initiatives that reinvigorated and rebuilt the leadership capacity in their states. Our presenters today are Jane Humphreys, who leads the work of Aim for Excellence at the McCormick Center, and she's worked in many areas of early childhood, both in service delivery as well as in research and academics. And she's created professional development systems and supported them in practically every state in the nation. We're delighted to have Jane, who's leading our discussion today. I also want you to meet Rebecca Lamar, who manages higher education initiatives at the Pennsylvania Key. And if you don't know, the Pennsylvania Key is really an arm, I would say, of the Pennsylvania Department of Early Education. It's out in the community. And the initiatives there she has 25 years of experience in this area of education. Becca specializes in offering supports to Latino, Latinx early childhood professionals and supporting their professional development in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Rebecca is a bilingual oral storyteller for children and adults as she supports the arts, social justice and change, and cultural celebrations. Chris Madden is the Assistant Director of Workforce Programs for the Pennsylvania Key as well, and she oversees the professional development and QRIS systems in the Professional Development Registry. Her team oversees a multitude of workforce development credentials and registry and manages the technical aspects as well as policies and procedures for the PD work. Chris also offers technical assistance to individuals across the country and to national organizations. Christine Jenkins is a 4K manager at South Carolina First Steps in Columbia and has almost 30 years of experience in the field of early education, including as an owner and director for 17 years. Part of her job at First Steps is overseeing a team of coaches who provide direct assistance to child care directors to help them build the overall quality of their programming. Pam Palmer has worked in the early childhood field also for over 25 years and in many areas associated with building quality. One of her greatest achievements was her work around implementing and operating North Dakota's quality rating and improvement system, which is called Bright and Early ND. She is currently a client success manager for New World Now LLC. Jane, I'm going to turn it back to you and let us hear what you have to say today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karen. Jonathan, next slide, please. Good afternoon and welcome. We certainly want to thank all of those individuals at the Build Initiative who helped to provide this webinar event. And we also graciously appreciate Jonathan for all the technology support he's offering to us today. My colleagues and I are delighted to work collectively to deliver this learning opportunity to you. As we launch today's information, know that each state will begin by bringing to you a brief overview of the history leading up, during, and resulting steps due to the pandemic. This will include insights into their state decision-making and strategy. Whether it was a one-person grassroots effort or opportunities to capitalize on what they already had in place, each launched unique supports to reinvigorate and rebuild early childhood leadership capacity. So with all that said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Christine Jenkins, who will tell you a little more about South Carolina.
Thank you, Jane. I'm thrilled to be here today with my colleagues. In South Carolina, prior to the pandemic, some of our challenges were that our main education for our early childhood directors was primarily face-to-face. It was provided through professional development, sometimes in our technical colleges, but it was at scheduled times, and oftentimes that limited the accessibility for those courses and for that training. So staffing challenges, not being able to get away from your location to be able to get into those professional development opportunities was also a huge challenge. As many of us know, feeling undervalued as an early childhood provider is also a huge challenge prior to the pandemic. And I'll talk a little bit about how that made us feel during the pandemic as well. And as we rolled into the pandemic, all of our worlds shifted. We found that we had to go to an online platform, not only for the education that we were providing for families, but in our own learning as well. So a lot of our professional development opportunities then had to shift to that online format. So that made them a little bit more accessible. But the content area of what was provided for early childhood leaders in South Carolina did not necessarily target the specific skill set and knowledge that they needed to be effective, high quality leaders. So we improved the accessibility, but the quality was still not quite on target. When we rolled into the pandemic, our schools, like many other states, our schools shut down. The children that had to do virtual learning were then shuffled into homes to do their public school learning, or they had to land in childcare centers. And those childcare centers were already dealing with their own challenges with the health situations, staffing situations, and trying to be able to meet the varied needs of the families. So although they were needed more, they weren't necessarily valued more. Coming out of the pandemic, we saw changes in staffing. We saw that salaries were able to demand a higher salary schedule. The childcare providers were having to meet those demands of those higher salaries. They were really feeling the pinch of staffing because a lot of people left the field. So we had to try to figure out different ways to be able to locate and attract staff to this field. So that presented its own challenges. As far as the trends and changes that we're seeing, everything has started to increase in costs, including wages, including the different materials and things that you need to purchase in order to operate your business. So fees started to change as well. Being able to access the educational opportunities virtually, that I would say that's a positive change, but we're still adjusting to that. As far as state decision making and strategy, I am by no means a state decision maker. In South Carolina, our opportunity to get involved in Aim for Excellence was very much a grassroots effort. But we do see that childcare providers in our state are being provided with sustainability grants through various resources to help keep them going, because we're trying to make sure that we can keep childcare around so that our economic impact is not just devastated. We know that we need to, in order to have people working, we must have childcare. So that's a little bit of insight as to what was going on in South Carolina. Next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Lamar, and I am going to be sharing a little bit about where we were right before the pandemic. And then as we expand into the stories of our state, we'll hear more from my amazing colleague, Chris. And we will really talk through some of the aftermath. And so in order to set the stage so that you get a good understanding of where Pennsylvania was, we had very similar things in our state as South Carolina. Prior to the pandemic, we were really looking for great opportunities for leadership learning and leadership advancement. And at the current time, we really had options that were built through our higher ed programs, as well as an alternative portfolio option and an alternative pathway, which would be available to individuals that might have some experience and an advanced degree in leadership. As we got to the doorstep of the pandemic in February and March, we had already begun to recognize some trends that were brought through some data collected with our workforce registry, as well as hearing narratives from leadership that time management and project management continued to be a challenge as staffing issues continued to be a challenge. And so when we got to the pandemic, we really shifted our focus into a different space. And I wanted to share a little bit of a Native story to kind of set the stage in some of what Chris and I will be talking about a little bit later. And my story comes from the Omaha Plains Natives. And they talk of a great mystery or an energy of life called Wakanda. And Wakanda exists in two spaces. The first space that it occupies is causing movement or action. And that creates all sorts of things. Again, in the Omaha Plains tribe, that focus might be on animals and tribal engagement. But in Pennsylvania, surrounding supporting our leadership and the workforce, it had us really thinking about how can we empower what we already have to create movement or action. The second thing that Wakanda speaks of with the Great Mystery is creating permanency. And again, in that Native space, that's creating strategic planning, that's making sure that there's succession in terms of the tribe itself, but also everything around it. And again, in Pennsylvania, our focus was to really pull from the data that we had been collecting and think through what are strategies, what are components that will allow this to continue on after we bounce back or get into a different way of existing after COVID. And because of those two forces of creating permanency and causing movement, it required our state to really pause and be in a space of observation and reflection so that we could really identify what was working prior to the pandemic, what is not working because of all of the complications that the pandemic brought. And then again, causing that movement and engaging, what can we do as a supportive force to our Office of Child Development to mobilize an action that would continue on beyond the emergency response that we did have in a state. Our state decision-making and strategy really follows a similar pattern as many other states. We focus heavily on data collected in our workforce registry, as well as identifying case studies or narratives that there really isn't a quick and easy answer right away. So that is the setting, if you will, for Pennsylvania, and I'll go ahead and pass it on to North Carolina.
Or North Dakota.
So sorry, North Dakota.
That's totally okay, Becca. So I am Pam Palmer, and you may have noticed that I'm serving two roles today. So I actually was the former AIM for Excellence facilitator, was part of my role in North Dakota, and now I'm client success manager in New World. So I'm going to go back and forth between the two. I will say that North Dakota actually fared pretty well as far as the pandemic was impacted us. And the reason being for that is, as you probably already guessed, we're quite rural. So we already had to think outside the box as far as making everything paperless, having our registry online, the QRIS online, a lot of online learning. The majority of the learning opportunities could be online already. So that piece of it fared really well with North Dakota. What they actually weren't prepared for, though, was the agency, the organization that housed the CCDF quality contract for North Dakota, very abruptly closed during the same time frame. So this agency had been around for 100 years, so it was very abrupt, very unexpected, and it left early childhood services kind of in chaos, for lack of a better word. And so what happened was the registry, the QRIS, majority of the training, coaching, all of that came to a standstill because the people that had those roles no longer had a job or had an organization for them. So out of that came the state stepping in to create temporary positions for each of those people. And from those temporary positions, they were able to do kind of a skeleton look to keep early childhood services going, but it really obviously was not enough. So luckily, after a legislative approval, many of the staff that were doing all those early childhood services became permanent state employees. And then there was also a contract that went out for coaching and for QRIS assessments into two separate organizations within the state. And what that meant is key stakeholders that were at that organization that closed, so were contracts of the state, all of a sudden were at the table and were state employees and were able to make decisions that were very intentional with the history of what they've already done. So I am going to take the trajectory when I talk in a couple of minutes about what North Dakota has done. It's pretty amazing how they used that opportunity that really was devastating for so many people and put a standstill to early childhood services. They used that opportunity, they built upon it, and they've created something pretty remarkable. So I'm very excited to share what they've created. But with that, I will turn it over to my friend Jane. Next slide.
Now that all three states have shared where they're coming from, partnering to support rebuilding also included a commonality between all three states, which was to utilize the professional development program, Aim for Excellence, and the workforce data system provided by New World Now. Next slide, Jonathan. Actually, the next one after that. The Aim for Excellence program is one of the many professional development programs provided by the McCormick Center for Early Childhood Leadership at National Louis University. The McCormick Center has been dedicated for over 3 decades to improve the quality of early learning programs through professional development, research and evaluation, and public awareness. Our drive has been to promote a greater understanding of the critical role of early childhood leaders in the provision of quality services for children and their families. While we provide a variety of services, I encourage you to go to our website and check out the many programs provided. Next slide. The Aim for Excellence program is totally online and created specifically for early childhood leaders to receive cutting-edge professional development which enhances leadership competencies and capacity. This program is designed to be taken as one module due to a topic of interest, or participants can take all 9 and earn the Aim for Excellence National Director credential, which is recognized in many states to support QRIS, and it assists in meeting the NAEYC accreditation standards for administrators. An engaging online experience, our modules are focused on the core leadership and management competencies better known as the whole leadership framework. Next. Next slide. Taught within these 9 self-paced modules, participants gain a deeper insight into different aspects of early childhood leadership. Each module is designed to enhance leadership knowledge while also providing practical ideas and application strategies that are very unique to early childhood programs. As you review the titles, you can see that there are many crucial areas covered within this program. While the first modules begin by looking at oneself from a leadership perspective, It progresses into recruiting, orienting, and selecting staff, managing program operations, and the importance of systems thinking within the early childhood business setting. The 3 modules, focused within the pedagogical lens of the whole leadership framework, focuses the leader's perspective on how to design and sustain indoor and outdoor environments, lead staff as they support children's development and learning, and last but by no means least, a focus on program quality and improvement. Next. Another key component is the eligibility for college credit through National Louis University or other partnering institutions. As mentioned before, the credential supports NAEYC accreditation to assist with meeting administrator qualifications. While I will share the 25 states where we support their professional development systems, our focus in this presentation will be on South Carolina, North Dakota, and Pennsylvania. Next, from our facilitated cohort model delivered face-to-face, totally online or hybrid, this online learning opportunity has truly created networks of leaders across the nation and has built communities of practice that engage and empower each other as they lead in early childhood programs. These cohorts have been supported by resource and referral staff, established coaching, mentoring, and technical assistance staff, along with identified state agency network providers. As a professional who worked early on to build professional development systems within my home state of Oklahoma, it is truly a pleasure to see all of the unique thinking that's taking place to rebuild and reinvigorate early childhood leadership. Now I'm going to turn it over to another important partner, New World Now, who has been very invested in creating a suite of integrated systems to support a complete set of workforce data within our field. Each one of the states in this presentation utilize the system and have worked collectively to enhance their systems to best support providers in their respective states. With that said, Pam, tell us a little bit more about New World Now.
Thanks, Jane. So now I'm going to put my New World Now hat back on and talk to you about, so I am a client success manager at New World Now. What that means is there's actually 4 of us at New World, and we represent the client to help build their data system up. We're all former clients, which is actually kind of beneficial because we speak your language. So we want to give you a little bit of a background of what the data system looks like, primarily because it is based in all 3 states, as Jane mentioned. So it's important to understand how it looks on the backside of things, but I don't want to take too much time away from the actual meat of what everybody's doing. So just give me a couple minutes right here to explain a little bit about the data system itself. Next slide, please. So just wanted to give you an overall look. We actually work with 13 different states across the country. Their data systems are in some form of entity part of our system as well. It's a consortium module, which means that they're allowed to share each other's projects if they so choose. And we have that base module. And what that means is we have a base module that clients choose, and then they are flexible in that we can create different parts of the system to match individual needs of individual states. So their business rules, their policies, their procedures. It's a very flexible system that benefits all involved. Next slide. And this just gives you a little bit of an idea of the different enhancements or modules that we do offer. Primarily, registry is very important to our system. And the QRIS module is another piece. The learning management system provides those online learning opportunities, and they all integrate together, which is a pretty important part to discuss as well. And then we have a consumer ed module as well. We have a lot of pieces to the system, and many states use all the pieces. Some states use a couple of the pieces. It's very, very flexible depending on the state's needs. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about how Aim for Excellence was brought into Insight itself. And the reason this isn't so important to talk about is it's actually because all 3 states that are talking today use our system. You're going to be able to find Aim for Excellence in a very similar way. So it's going to look, regardless of if you're in South Carolina or North Dakota or Pennsylvania, you're going to find Aim for Excellence in the system very similarly. And typically it is registry approved. There's a consortium of peers, as I said, so different clients can actually, well, we actually get together on a monthly basis and they can share and brainstorm and determine if they want to use a shared approach towards projects as well. It's a smart approach to being fiscally responsible and also allowing for knowledge sharing across states too. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of a bird's eye view of how an individual would find Aim for Excellence in the system. This is a typical individual profile. So this Jess Day is a child care provider. She has her own profile. She logs into the profile. Her profile is the keeper of all the important things for her. It tracks her training. It helps her find training, tracks her education level. She can also attach to an organization that she's employed with, and that helps with applying for grants and scholarships and QRIS and all the good things. But specifically right now, we're talking about Aim for Excellence. So for Aim for Excellence, all she has to do is log into her profile and look at the training calendar that would show all of the registry approved training in that state. And so the highlighted section right there says search training events. Next slide, Jonathan. She was to click that, it would give her all kinds of filters in order to filter down to exactly the training she is looking for. And, you know, as you all know, many states have thousands of trainings. So just saying, oh, show me all the trainings would be a little bit overwhelming. So we developed a lot of filters that individuals can use to filter down to specifically what they're looking for. This one is just Aim for Excellence, search it in the title because we knew the title. If you don't know the title though, you can search by hours, you can search by cost, you can search by days. There's a whole bunch of filters that you can search by to help get to the training that you're specifically asking for. The next slide. So just to give you a little bit of a glimpse of on your left is a training glance. And what this means is the individual can just go to their training tab on that same profile and they can see all the trainings they've completed or that they have registered for. It gives them kind of a bird's eye view of where they're at with their training requirements, maybe for the licensing year, for quality rating, everything. And just it keeps everything in one spot so they don't have to track certificates, and you know, it's all right there as they log into the system. And then if you look on the right side, there's a formal report that individual has access to, and also possibly the organization and even licensors, so that they're not again having to go through file cabinets of individual learning records to make sure that they've met the licensing requirements. This learning record will pop up, and we actually have an additional one that pops up as a staff report. And then a licensor can look at all the staff in one glance in one report to make sure that they are all meeting their licensing requirements. They've met the number of hours that they've needed to complete it per that state's laws or rules. And next slide. One other thing I just wanted to bring to your attention is our system is fully translatable, and we've always been fully translatable, but just recently we enhanced our technology. So we have the very latest technology, and I'm showing you Michigan right now because they are the latest to do this. Michigan just chose to translate their system to Arabic and to Spanish. So that means an individual that's native language or preferred language is one of those two languages can actually click on either of those. It will automatically translate everything the individual sees, so they can actually do the work in their native language, which makes it much more equitable for them. So next slide, please. With that, I would like to turn it over to Christine.
Thank you, Pam. When Karen introduced me earlier, she mentioned a little bit about my history. And part of what I brought into South Carolina and my work with South Carolina First Steps in the 4K program is that I have been a childcare owner and director for almost 20 years and owning multiple sites. During the journey of that experience, one of the things that I quickly realized is that my knowledge and skills set, my education, was very focused on education. I came from that background, but there were certain things that were missing in my background and in my skill set. And in particular, I needed more business knowledge. So I started searching and I started looking for opportunities to improve that. One of the resources that I found was working with our local county partnership office. With the First Steps program, we have a county partnership office in every one of our 46 counties around the state, and they can bring different programs to the early childhood providers and families of young children in their communities. The 4K program is another branch of the First Steps organization, and we work with private child care centers and nonprofit independent schools around the state, providing 4K publicly funded education in those private childcare settings. So as I transitioned from being that childcare owner and coming into the First Steps 4K program, one of the things that I found was other directors and other providers were finding the same deficits in their own educational experiences. So I took part of what I had learned about, and I had been introduced to the McCormick Center for Early Childhood Leadership through those opportunities when I was a child care director, and brought them into our organization. Next slide, please. So one of the things that, one of the opportunities that we had is in 2017 and 2018, the 4K program was given the opportunity to use a source of funding to help build the quality of our programs. So the programs that we were working with in 4K, we were tasked with trying to help them improve the quality. One of the things that we noticed is that our when we first started out, our education focused solely on the teacher in the classroom, and we were not branching that educational opportunities out to our early childhood leaders, so that if the teacher left the program and went to another position, that education walked out the door with them. So we knew we needed to bring some of that educational opportunity and some of that quality building to the leaders of these programs. So we started providing them with educational resources. The Aim for Excellence program was one initiative where we were able to bring that to our 4K childcare providers to help strengthen their leadership, improve opportunities for higher education, and thereby strengthening the 4K instruction and implementation, and then also strengthening their quality. Next slide, please. When we started off, we had 3 cohorts in our first 3 to 4 years of funding that were only linked to our 4K partnership. So we had 15 successful completers that achieved their national director's credential in our very first cohort. We had 13 in the second, and the dip that you see that's in the green circle, where we only had 9 people complete, was during the pandemic. That was an exceptionally challenging time, and it was also the longest period of time because of all the challenges that we dealt with, many health challenges and many personal losses during that time for our providers that were going through the cohort. So it took an extended period of time to complete that. After that cohort, we were fortunate enough to be able to get some additional funding from another resource. South Carolina was the beneficiary of a federal grant called the Preschool Development Grant, and we were able to get some funding through that Preschool Development Grant to blend with our 4K funding to provide an additional resource and to reach further, reach more childcare directors. And what we did is we partnered with some of our county partnership offices, and if they had quality enhancement opportunities, if they had technical assistants that worked with their providers, if they had a directors forum and some sort of a support system for early childhood directors in their area, then we reached out to them and asked them if they wanted to join into our cohorts. So the 2 subsequent cohorts from that started to grow. So we had 19 successful completers in the following year. And in cohort 5, which we are just wrapping up now, we had 33 participants, and we will probably have about 30 completers in that cohort. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we had to adapt when we brought Aim for Excellence into South Carolina. Aim for Excellence has a component where you have a support group meeting. So you have a monthly meeting at least every month, and that's typically face-to-face. In our program, we had to adapt it so that we could do that online. Because we are statewide and we were not able to reach everybody in a face-to-face format. Aim for Excellence in South Carolina is offered outside of our technical college opportunities. We have a director's credential in our technical colleges, but it is through the TEACH program, and it stands separate from our Aim for Excellence program currently. We're hoping that in the future we may be able to meld the two, if you will. Our modules, when we first started off, the Aim for Excellence modules were not fully recognized in our system, but then when they adapted the New World system, that we were able to now get full approval for those Aim for Excellence modules, and they get their professional development credit hours through that. This takes a long time to complete this program. So when we set up our Aim for Excellence cohorts, we anticipate a pace of a full year. We plan for at least 1 module per month, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer, so we tack on a few extra months, and we say we need a full year of commitment. And that's very challenging for a lot of people when you're not really sure what life is going to bring in that full year. We were blessed to be able to extend our program, and one of the unique parts of our program in South Carolina is that when you participate in our Aim for Excellence program, not only do you have a facilitator that is a support system for you, but you also have a coach that is dedicated to you. So whether it's one of our 4K coaches or whether it is a technical assistant coach in one of our county partnerships, there is someone that is a dedicated support person for you. One of the natural challenges in this field is the attrition rate or turnover rate, and that includes our directors. We do see that some directors will leave the field, they will take other positions, they'll move from program to program, or they'll just, leave early childhood altogether or retire. So that's always one of the challenges that we face. Next slide, please. In our Aim for Excellence program in South Carolina, we have been able to provide equitable access to these leadership opportunities and these higher educational opportunities for some of our African American and people of color that are leaders in our field. We find that this is very valuable, and we find that it reflects the population that we see in our programs. In our Aim for Excellence cohort, we have over 50% are African American and 54% are actually people of color. In our early childhood workforce, that percentage is reflected at about 40% that are African American and about 45% that are people of color. Next slide, please. One of the things that we also support is a pathway to higher education. In South Carolina, we have very minimal requirements in order to be an early childhood director. You could be an early childhood director with just a high school diploma or GED and a few years of experience supervising staff. So we wanted to provide an opportunity to earn undergraduate credit. So in addition to the scholarships that we provide to earn the National Director's Credential, we also support the undergraduate credits earned through National Louis University for our providers who have yet to attain a bachelor degree or above. So if they have a 2-year degree, they could just have a smattering of some college courses, or they just have a high school diploma or GED, then we provide them that additional opportunity to earn 3 undergraduate course credits or 9 credit hours through our scholarship program. Next slide. So what are the opportunities and the strengths of the program in South Carolina? Well, we feel like having to model this program as a fully online program is definitely a strength. It provides an ease of accessibility for our providers. They can work during the time that suits their schedule, and it allows them that flexibility to access it at any point during the course of a day. We also provide that cohort meeting in an online format, although those are scheduled at particular times of the day. But we feel that that is a critical component to maintain in the program. We have been able to blend funding streams to allow us to expand and grow this program and to reach providers that we may not have reached previously. We have the dedicated support of a coach or a technical assistant to make sure that the child care director is fully supported throughout this process and to help to make sure that they stay on track. We also provide the higher education component, which I just talked about. And this credential is recognized within our state quality rating system and is also recognized by the NAEYC accreditation. For those who are going through our program that earn their National Director's Credential, we also have a bonus available for them. And we have other perks that help to support their business. Our next steps for this program, we're hoping to be able to link a pre and post evaluation of their program. As they complete this National Director's Credential, we want to have that additional evaluation to see if we are actually moving the needle on the quality of their program. And we use the program administration scale to do so. We're looking for continued and additional resources for blended funding. We're hoping that one day that it will be fully integrated into our technical college system, so it is accessible to more and more people throughout our state. And we also are looking forward to the Aim for Excellence program being fully translated into Spanish for our Spanish-speaking population. Next slide. We have a few testimonials, and a lot of these folks have a lot to say, so I'm not going to just read through them, but I want to hit on a couple of highlights in each of these testimonials. This is Mary, and Mary is in my current cohort, and she was brand new stepping into the role as a director, as many of us have felt before. When we are a wonderful educator, then all of a sudden we get the opportunity to be a leader. And she was feeling very pleased and very grateful for the opportunity to step into that. But she was also feeling very overwhelmed because she didn't really know how to be a child care director. So this opportunity came along just at the right time for her. She also had not taken any college coursework before. So being able to ease into this program and get college credit for it was very meaningful for her. And she felt in the first 3 modules that she was working within, she was immediately able to take some of that material and apply it to her work. So that's exactly what we hope to hear. Next slide, please. This young lady is a dedicated early childhood professional, and she was in our cohort 4, I believe. And with her, she has a very busy life, although she will always be able to fit something else into her life. But one of the things that stands out in her testimonial is that she felt like she had ample time to complete the coursework. She was able to have that support in the background, and she felt like this additional certification helped to enhance her leadership skills and improve her business operations. She works with a church-based organization, so she has to answer to a board of directors, and to implement improvements in her program, she often has to come in with a budget and a really good pitch. So when she finished this program, she felt like she was really on track to be able to be that leader and to advocate for her program to build quality and provide additional opportunities for her children. Next slide, please. This director is near and dear to my heart. This director just retired, but when she went through cohort 3, which was during the pandemic, so she was one of those 9 completers, she already had attained a master's degree in early childhood education. She had been a director for over 18 years. And part of the testimonial that she shared with me that really resonated with me is that as a child care director of 18 years, the modules were the perfect refresher for the staleness that could come with a long-term experience. In no time at all, our lives that were filled with closures, financial losses, reopening in the midst of pandemic, personal losses for so many. And she found that her studies were that stabilizing force that kept her going one step at a time, one day at a time. And so much of the material, she felt it was able to still apply to her program, still apply to what she implemented and their policies and procedures, even though she had been in this field for so long. So you can teach an old dog new tricks. Next slide, please. And we always make sure that when we complete a cohort, that we have a celebration. So this is a particular luncheon where we take our completer, our national directors out, and we treat them to a luncheon, or we have an award ceremony We make sure that they receive their credential, they get their surprise bonus, and then we also will gift them with a book that helps them along their journey of being an early childhood leader. So I will turn it over now to our friends in Pennsylvania.
Next slide, please. Hi, everyone. I think Karen already did the introductions, but I just want to introduce myself again. I'm Chris Madden, and I'm the Assistant Director of Workforce Initiatives at the Pennsylvania Key. So I oversee all things PD registry and QRIS in the registry that just launched last year. So one of those initiatives within the PD registry is the Director Credential. We wanted to make it easier for applicants to apply seamlessly in the system, and then be able to be placed on the career pathway along with their credentials and their plus level, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And then I'll just give Rebecca a minute to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Again, our intro was done at the beginning. My name again is Rebecca Lamar, and in my work of managing the higher education initiatives, my work is to work with the Pennsylvania-based higher education programs to provide a connection between our Office of Child Development and Early Learning and connecting with their coursework, so that as they have students matriculate through their programs, they are getting a full understanding of not just the coursework involved with getting a degree, but also the workforce readiness that is required by our state agencies.
So the Pennsylvania Key works on behalf of the Office of Child Development and Early Learning, which we refer to as OCDEL. And one of the many initiatives is the Director Credential through either partnering with our higher ed institutions in Pennsylvania and the McCormick Aim for Excellence to ensure that there's professional leadership in childcare programs in Pennsylvania. So with the Director Credential, individuals are placed on a plus level on the career pathway, which we're going to show next. So that gives them also the ability to have a Keystone Star 3 or 4 program. That is a requirement for our quality rating and improvement system at a 3 or 4 level, that the director does have a director credential, because we know that the competencies and leadership in quality programs are important and for the knowledge of those directors. And I just want to give a little backstory too with the director credential, because years and years ago, we had a list of all of the NACCE approved out-of-state director credentials, and McCormick Aim for Excellence was on that list of approved director credentials. And then over the past several years, I worked closely with Jane to see how we could make it easier for that to be another option, because we knew from the data that there were already people taking the McCormick Aim for Excellence in Pennsylvania. So we wanted to make it easy, and as Pam had said, our system is set up the same way where individuals can search for these courses within the registry. So it's easy, it's right there for them to find them. They register and then they complete those modules at their own pace. So that was extremely important, especially during the COVID times where we needed people to have options to take asynchronous courses.
Next slide, please. So as Chris shared in a previous slide, in Pennsylvania, we do have what is called a career pathway. And essentially, our career pathway is a way or a map of the professional journey that an ECE professional might decide to take. And we really use points of destination, for lack of a better term, by highlighting coursework, degree work, credentials, and certification in our pre-K through 4 system. And so as Chris had shared, we do recognize the director credential in our level A plus, level B plus, and level C plus. And what that essentially helps in terms of providing a guide for leadership is for our providers, they can use this as a tool to promote within their facility, their site, their home, as what might be the next step for their educational journey. Additionally, as they are creating spaces to hire staff, they can use this tool to get an understanding of how someone may come into our system, be placed on the career pathway, and then be able to engage in operations throughout the child care or the family care site. For IHEs and our trainers, our consultants, this is also a tool that does help them connect directly with the expectation of our Office of Child Development and Early Learning, as again, a destination of where they'd like to see the ECE professionals progress as they grow in their experience as well as their time as an ECE professional. Next slide, please.
So we wanted to share this data that comes from the National Workforce Registry Alliance. Our system has really become an actual workforce registry data system. So we can collect all of this information, especially the roles of providers and the education and where they fall. And this is called PER, and this data, it stands for Partners in Employment Reporting. So each state has to become approved with the Alliance to be able to send this data, collect this data every 2 years to send to the Alliance to report out on an executive report that shares all of the statistics about our workforce. So this data is 2 years old, and the next data were actually just submitted for PER. So that next executive report should come out within this fall. So the numbers would change, because the data that I'm showing you now was when our career pathway was just launched in the PD registry. So people were just starting to upload all of their education. But at the time, we could see that 10% of the ECE workforce was directors. And then we really wanted to take a look at the education part. So we could see that for center directors, there were 33%, 33.6 that had an ECE bachelor's degree, and then 16.9 that had a higher degree. And we really want to use this data because if we see somebody that has an associate's degree or maybe a non-related, but they want to take the director credential because they want to move up in the quality rating and improvement system, we want to be able to offer supports or see how many people need to complete the director credential to maybe possibly offer more funding in the future. So this just shows you the analysis, and that we can also say, you know, hey, this many people have an associate's degree and they have 2 courses that would count for the director credential at a specific college. What can we do to support them to complete that extra course that would actually give them the credential? And the same is true for the bachelor's and the master's degree. So we're really using this data not only to show where we are and to hopefully make policy changes at the national level in terms of wages, but just to offer support for those seeking the director credential. And then the director credential, it was designed to measure and validate the abilities and competencies of directors and administrators to manage high quality early childhood and school age programs. And another thing that we're working on is the new director competencies, so that we can, you know, tie this into the director credential as well. So it represents the level of personal and professional accomplishments, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. It represents the professional contributions through the demonstrated leadership, active engagement in professional endeavors, and beyond the scope of the daily operations of the work. And then again, like I noted before, it really helps to award those directors with their high quality programs to move to the 3- and 4-star level. So with the director credential in Pennsylvania, initially a person has to have 9 ECE credits. And then once they have those 9 ECE credits, they can take the director credential modules, including the Aim for Excellence. And then if they do take the Aim for Excellence modules, they then apply for the specific credential, the Pennsylvania specific credential. And that includes the total number of credits, completion of the Aim for Excellence, and then a letter from their employer stating their number of years of supervisory experience. And the renewal is a little more in depth. They have to have a pedagogy statement, a membership in an ECE professional organization, 90 hours of professional development, or a 3-credit college course. And then the PD plan and self-assessment, the individual professional development statement, and 3 professional contributions. And those contributions could be anything from advocacy, grant writing, engaging in a presentation for, a professional conference. So there's a whole list of professional contributions that they can choose from, and they just have to document that they have done 3 of those.
I am going to talk a little bit about some thoughtful questions that we had as a part of our process. And I'm going to remind you about our story that we started with the great mystery, or the Wakanda, that has both the creating movement as well as creating permanency. So as you look at these questions, and as I talk a little bit more of the narrative, I want you to think about what some of these questions were more connected to. Was it to create the movement, or was it to create more permanency? Because when we think about the traditional director credential pathway in Pennsylvania, as Chris had said, we think about participants completing 3 higher ed courses at a higher ed institution within Pennsylvania. While we have had a long-standing relationship with McCormick and knew that AIM for Excellence modules meet the standards of NAUYC and the Pennsylvania Director Credential Standards, it made great sense that the McCormick AIM for Excellence became approved in Pennsylvania, because it was, as Chris had said, on the list of approved out-of-state director credentials through NACE. We also needed to find a way to offer self-paced courses in addition to our face-to-face options or our online traditional courses, due to the general busy schedule of the directors. But then again, when COVID entered the situation, that made it that much more complicated, as directors really tried to lift up their staff. They tried to keep their doors open to support families. We also recognized some barriers, and one primary barrier was the family childcare providers, and knowing that their schedule is slightly different. I think slightly is an understatement, but they operate in a different kind of methodology, and so require some next level options that the McCormick AIM for Excellence did have embedded with them. Additionally, the convenience of self-paced is really, really important, as we heard in some of our stakeholder engagement meetings, especially for the role of a family child care director. Next slide. And so we also want to talk about causing movement, or really reflecting on what was working. And so existing already as we were making decisions and asking those reflective questions, we did have the PD registry with the search options. We also had a separate state credential option within Pennsylvania. And we also had many website resources available, and a streamlined DC director credential application within our PD registry. We provided training for our team members that provide direct support for our students. And we, of course, love our conversations with Jane and McCormick in terms of learning the best ways to market, message, and what next steps might be. Finally, just getting a lay of the land, or understanding, as other states were working through this and collaborating with great states such as North Dakota and South Carolina, were really key to our progress. Next slide.
So as we know, data is extremely important, especially in the PD registry. So there's lots of data that we collect constantly about different credentials, especially the director credential. So for McCormick, since they are an organization within the PD registry, they can pull data on how many completions there are within the modules that students have taken. They can see, how many within a year, within a certain time period. We can also view reports in the PD registry, such such as those completions. We do get asks from our state agency on a monthly basis as to how many people have completed the director credential, how many people have completed a renewal. It also lets us offer support. So if we would happen to look at the rosters for or an individual person for the Aim for Excellence modules, and we see that, maybe they completed module 1 through 5, but it looks like they haven't, completed any additional modules in the last, year. So we could reach out and ask them if there's any support that they need on our end. Could it have been like financial reasons or time constraints? We all know that directors are extremely busy. So just finding out how we can support them, that offers a lot of additional ways that we use the data. And it also helps us to determine the star level of the programs. So we want to see how many people in Pennsylvania have completed the director credential at a star 3 and 4 level, but we also want to know if there's any individuals that have completed the director credential at a star 1 or 2. Maybe they're not ready to move up to 3 or 4, and starting the process of the director credential is one way to get them to move up with all the other indicators that are required for the star level. And then we can also view the regions of completions for future initiatives. So we can pull a report on where the individuals are completing the director credential. For example, we may see that there's a lot of completion in, Erie, Pennsylvania, but we may look at Pittsburgh and see that there's not as many completing the director credential. So maybe it's marketing to that specific area. Maybe it's trying to determine, and this is something that we've talked about before, and we've talked with Jane about this, is possibly having cohorts for directors, especially in those areas, that we're not seeing a lot of growth within the director credential, because maybe they need additional supports of collaborating with their peers on completing these modules together. So all of this data is used for various reasons, and also goes to the state level as well, because that can determine how many people have not only completed it, but how many people need to complete it to move up to star levels, because we always want programs to try to move up to the next star level. So that could, prompt some funding if available.
So we talked a little bit about barriers. So I'm just going to expand quickly on some of the feedback when we did, in fact, go to our stakeholders. Again, around that messaging and advertising, we had to recognize that during COVID, there were this may not have been a priority for teachers and directors and admin. And we recognize also that there's something about being intentional about advertising state higher education director credentials versus the Aim for Excellence modules. And so it is a delicate balance for PA, because in our role, we are not able to stand only behind one version or one program. We really operate in the sense of providing options so that providers are finding what meets their needs the best. Next slide. And so with the potential opportunities for next steps, really looking at funding options with financial assistance and expanding on what that could look like. As Chris shared, creating cohorts, promoting Spanish speaking cohorts. That is definitely something that we are leaning into as we gain more and more data about native Spanish speakers or preferred languages, and then expanding into articulation agreements. Next slide. And so we wanted to finish with a great testimonial, and shout out to Kelly Ann, because I believe that she is joining us today. So Pennsylvania is so proud of you, Kelly Ann. Keep doing your awesomeness. So I just wanted to lift up some thoughts that Kelly Ann shared with us. And so when we think about what is the dream, quote unquote, characteristics of a powerful and intentional leader, I think we see that in Kelly Ann's testimonial. And so I'm not going to read all the way through it. I'm just going to highlight some of those characteristics. And so we know that we are looking for leaders that ensure the use of ethical practices. We look for leaders who understand that they can build upon their skills to improve their program's overall quality. We also look for leaders that develop a vision for quality improvement. And I just want to read the last part that really touched me when I read this. And Kelly shares that it was an honor to work as a leader in such a wonderful field. And I think if there's anything that we can leave with this group about how Pennsylvania supports their ECE leadership, it's that. So with that, I will turn it over to Pam.
Thanks, Becca. Okay, so I am going to talk a little bit faster than I normally would, and I'm a North Dakotan, so I talk fast. So bear with me because I want to squeeze a lot in here. North Dakota's been doing some pretty remarkable things. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you a basis on where North Dakota is at for demographics. As you probably guessed, there's like 8,000 members in North Dakota. So that's probably pretty accurate as far as how many direct care providers there are in North Dakota. You'll notice that not a whole lot have early childhood specific higher ed degrees. This isn't that we don't think that's important, but reality is not everybody has that access. And so North Dakota chose to look at Aim for Excellence as another avenue of intentional professional development for early childhood leadership. Next slide. So I'm going to look at this in two different phases. Again, probably a little streamlined, a little bit faster than I would like to, but you all will have access to the PowerPoint. You can always contact me for additional information. So the first 10 years, actually North Dakota was one of the first states. It was North Dakota, Illinois, and Pennsylvania that brought Aim for Excellence to their state. Funding was limited. They actually brought it in as part of an overall project that was a kind of a precursor project to the QRIS system. So it was called Growing Childcare. So they wanted to focus on leadership within North Dakota. So as part of the overall center improvement project, they brought leadership into it too and tied Aim for Excellence to that. There are about 20 scholarships every year that were provided. Next slide. So typically Aim for Excellence was approved, but it was the manual way to do it. So this was before we were able to get it actual formally approved in the system. So individuals had to upload their training certificates to their learning record. Because North Dakota has very few admin, they had to, it could take up to 8 weeks in order to get that information to the individual's learning record. So they might have taken it 8 weeks ago. By the time the backlog was hit, so for the paperwork for the registry admin person, it would be approximately 8 weeks before it actually showed up on their learning record saying that they had completed it. And this is a key factor as that I'll refer back to in just a couple minutes here. And then McCormick also had a partnership with the University of North Dakota to allow modules to be completed for graduate credits. This is important because North Dakota saw how important Aim for Excellence modules were in the intentional focus on center director leadership, that they knew that it was very important to those that maybe didn't have that early childhood higher ed background, but it was also important to individuals that already did have that background. So they really wanted incentives for both sectors to be able to take this information because it was key to intentional learning as to their day-to-day activities. And then North Dakota used a cohort model similar to what others were saying to guide the cohorts. Next slide. And that cohort model, I was actually to dig up one of my old agendas from 2012. So we could not do face-to-face meetings because this was statewide. North Dakota is a very large state, and so that wasn't necessarily feasible. And that before Zoom and Teams and all that fun video conferencing, we did the old-fashioned conference calls. So each month, the center directors in this cohort would get together. We would actually have an agenda for talking points and for intentional learning of what they were learning with that specific module they were focused on. And we also gave them opportunity to build relationships with each other, brainstorm problem solving, things like that. And then on the other side of it, we developed our own evidence of learning separate from what the homework that was being done within the module. And this was more of a talking point for a coach to go in and work directly with the child care center director to see how what they are learning in the module was intentional and bringing directly into their own program. It was a beautiful mirage of relationship building and intentional practice learning as well. Next slide. So one of the key factors that North Dakota did in 2016, they redid their career pathways, and they actually brought Aim for Excellence in as the center director credential. So once you completed all 9 modules, you were awarded a category F in the career pathways. And this decision in 2016 impacts what they're doing now in 2023. So I'll bring that to a factor in just a couple minutes here. So next slide. So Aim for Excellence, fast forward to 2021, they decided to use their ARPA funds to develop incentives to give back to providers. And Aim for Excellence played a very huge factor in this, and all the things that happened in the last 10 years before that played an even bigger factor. They actually developed 3 different types of incentives: workforce training incentive, career pathways incentive, and workforce retention incentive. And actually, you could say Aim for Excellence is integrated in all 3 of those incentives, but we're really going to focus on those first 2, the workforce training and career pathways. So next slide. So workforce training stipend, what meant that current members are eligible if they're working towards an early childhood credential or degree. So notice, working towards an early childhood credential. North Dakota recognizes Aim for Excellence as a director center credential. So each time an individual completes 1 module, they can submit through an application process in their profile for a $300 incentive. So think if they completed all 9 modules, that's $2,700 that would be coming to their pocket. And what's important to note is that is more than what the actual module costs, because North Dakota valued the time that it takes for an individual to actually take the module too. So they wanted to provide additional funds for that time that it took. And then the additional thing on top of that, there's a career pathway stipend. And remember, I said before that because North Dakota recognizes the center director credential in their career pathway as a level F, the higher you are in that pathway, the more incentive you could get. So a level F, actually, you would be able to apply for a $1,000 incentive. So we've got, upwards of $3,700 that an individual, Aim for Excellence, because the individual completed Aim for Excellence, they have that much of a bonus that they could apply for. And there are a myriad of other incentives they can also apply for. This is very important for North Dakota to give back and try to keep that retention in the workforce. So next slide. So in order to apply for the incentives, North Dakota was extremely adamant when they talked to New World that they wanted a seamless application. So we were able to embed that application into an individual's profile. So just like how they searched for training, they can log into their profile and they can go to workforce incentives and stipends, click on it, and then next slide. They will get a very simple application, and because they did not want a lot of clicks, they didn't want providers to have to jump through a lot of hoops. And what's beautiful about this application is it involves all the stipends. It shows eligibility on all of them. So not only you will be able to see all stipends, but you'll also be able to see if you're eligible for them, and then you can just click it and you'll be able to apply for it. If you're not eligible for it, it gives you the reason for it to avoid those calls and everything. Because again, North Dakota is a 1.5 woman show on that side. They did not have the manpower to be able to approve all of these incentives individually. So next slide. So this just gives a little bit of an idea of the seamless transition between that. And the important thing to remember with that was another key factor is we actually involved New World, North Dakota Early Childhood Services, and North Dakota, their OMB or their accounting services. So it was a very good partnership in that North Dakota or New World developed logic that would, as soon as somebody applied for their incentive, on the backside, it contacts North Dakota and says, hey, do you have all the information you need in order to be able to issue a check right away to that provider? And if they did, North Dakota sends it back and says yes. So then that auto approval happens, the check happens very quickly. If they didn't, there was still some very back and forth magic going on behind the scenes where it looked to the provider like they weren't even leaving their profile. All of the information could be done right there in their profile. And then it gets back to North Dakota. They know that they can issue the check. The check gets in their hands that much faster. Next slide. So the other key factor in this was this overnight data share. So yes, McCormick became an approved training sponsor. All modules are submitted for approval, and we created an overnight data share. So remember that 8-week time frame that it took forever for somebody to show up on their learning record. Well, then that time frame actually went down to like 1 day, maybe 2 days. So McCormick sends over electronically all of their completions for North Dakota, and then so that they auto-magically show up on an individual's learning record within that next day of when they receive the data share. It's a pretty amazing process. And then because we're a consortium module, other states such as Pennsylvania and South Carolina can also use that data share as well. So next steps, we're just going to continue on with using PDG funds to continue with their grant activities, and in order to continue funding those incentives as well. So they just want to keep building that up. They obviously have some other projects in mind too, but it's pretty exciting things. I am so thrilled for North Dakota and all they did for individual childcare providers. So I'm going to turn it back to you really quickly, Jane.
All right, next slide, please. And the next. And so as I mentioned earlier today in the presentation, the McCormick Center's Aim for Excellence program has worked very hard to become integrated in 25 different state professional development systems, and we're currently working with others to be approved. This listing shows an array of states who are at different levels in the process of establishing and sustaining their state professional development system. Next slide. Another partner that we work with is the National Workforce Registry Alliance. For example, in Alaska, to be an approved source of training, we had to become a recognized training organization. We see them as an important partner due to their long-term investment in working with states to help systemize the collection of workforce data. It is with their help and many others that an incredible investment has been made by 3 states featured today, and those of you participating today who might be looking to fine-tune your supports of early childhood leaders as you reinvigorate and rebuild leadership capacity. Let's hear what one last participant had to say. Next slide. Jen Davis, who was with Christine's group out in South Carolina, just talks about how much she appreciated this amazing program, the knowledge, the guidance, and the camaraderie. And it truly is for her to understand that being a gatekeeper to quality for early childhood programming really resonated with her. So with that said, Karen, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I'm so wishing we had another hour for people to ask questions, because we've got lots of people that want to ask questions. But I want to do our polling. So if there's somebody particular you in the audience would like to ask a question, you'll put it in the poll, and they will know that you want them to contact you. We also will be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint as well as contact information for these individuals. So there'll be a couple of ways for you to make connections, but don't miss the opportunity. This is an incredible could be such an incredible part of everybody's system. And so even if you don't have the power to put that in place, you may have the power of persuasion to the powers that be. So don't miss the opportunity to try to get this in your state. It will be a very, very wise decision. I thank you so much to all. So start voting, if you will, or choosing the person or the state that you want to hear something particular from. And I'll also say, so we can get away on time, that I am so grateful for these individuals who have given their time and energy and done this incredible work and are willing to share it with us. Jane, Chris, Christine, Rebecca, and Pam, you're amazing. And we can't wait to hear more about this wonderful work. And to everybody in the audience, I wish I could call your name, but we're glad you hung with us. And I hope you're taking home some information that will improve your systems for the people who guide our programs all across the country. But thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Yes, and we'll all be at Build too. So if you have questions, come by and talk to us.
Thank you.